to your computer?
Yeah, I can do that.
English channel. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. So this is the information session for the Hampshire County Food Policy Council funding opportunity. So I'm going to go through a couple of introductory things and then we will get into the content. So we have a language channels open. So we are doing this meeting in English and Spanish. You should see, if you were on a computer that is not a Chromebook, you should see this little icon, this interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen, and you can select English or Spanish based on your preference. If you are having trouble with that, let us know in the chat and we can try to walk you through it. If you're on a phone or a Chromebook, sometimes it can be a little bit harder. So we are going to start with a check-in question in the chat. What was the last thing you had to make a budget for? So this could be like maybe grocery shopping, or maybe you had to plan a party or a vacation or something like that. So just think about what was the last thing you had to make a budget for. Nice. So I'm seeing sister's birthday party, wedding, summer camp for my son, my birthday party, medical expenses, yeah, pet expenses, grant. Yep, that's a big one that a lot of us have to make budgets for. Awesome. So travel out of town. Yeah, awesome. This is great. So we definitely want to hit home in this information session that we all plan things and we all make budgets all the time. And so, you know, for some folks who have less experience with writing grants, you know, it might seem like very big and overwhelming, but really we are all using the skills involved in our everyday lives. So just want to get that out there. Let's see. Oops. So here's the agenda for today's session. So we're in the introduction right now. We're going to talk about the funding opportunity and go through some of the required documents for application. We're going to do question and answers, and then we'll share some of the optional tools that circles can use to develop their project ideas. We might play around with these times a little bit because we have a really fun thing that Talia made that we have to put in here at some point. So, and we are missing something else that we plan to have in here. So we'll be a little bit flexible on this timing. So I will start by just talking about the funding opportunity. And I'll just go over some of the basic requirements to start. So the proposal for the project has to be submitted by a circle of the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So an independent organization or independent person can't submit a proposal. It has to be decided on together as a circle within a circle of the Food Policy Council. And the project should cost no more than $25,000. It does not have to cost $25,000. It should cost what it actually costs. And then all funds need to be spent out by June 30th, 2023. A couple of things, I think Talia is putting some links in the chat for us here. Oh, I see that Johanni is not hearing the translation. Oh, Giselle, it looks like you're on mute.
Got it.
Okay, thanks, Giselle. So we have, I think Talia shared the document there. That first link is just a description of the funding opportunity. And within that document, there are a bunch of links to other resources, but there's also a link here that Talia shared to the Google Drive folder that contains all the resources that we're going to talk about. If you would like to request translations of any materials, you can use that link that Talia put in the chat. We also put that link at the top of the about the funding opportunity document. So if you speak a language other than English, or you know someone who speaks a language other than English who would like to be able to read these materials, you can use that form to request a translation. And I think there was another, is that it for links on this slide, Talia? Yes, okay, awesome. We will move on then. All right, so another big requirement of the project that the circles will submit funding for is that they have to be in line with the vision and mission of the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So the vision is we envision a resilient, community-owned regional food system where all people are empowered to live more joyful and gratifying lives through access to affordable, healthy, locally grown food of their choice. And our mission is to cultivate shared governance and a countywide network that builds the power of community voice to make food policies more equitable, honor diverse cultures, and help local food economies to flourish. So as I mentioned, the project does have to be, the proposal has to be submitted by a circle of the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So we have several existing circles. If you go to our website, hcfpc.collaborative.org, you can see this diagram with all of our different circles. If there's something here that doesn't feel like it fits for you, you can start a new circle. So I'll go over sort of the aims of our current circles right now. And Talia is going to put some links in the chat, including a link to learn more about these circles in Spanish, which we couldn't fit on this slide, but we do have that information online. So we have basically 4 core circles, which are in yellow. So that are available to join. And those are capacity building, vision, food policy, and food action. So capacity building has the aim of building community power and leadership. Vision has the aim of cultivating shared governance and values. Food policy has the aim of developing and promoting equitable food policies. Food action has the aim of developing and supporting food programs and initiatives. So they're slightly different. Capacity building is really focused on building people's skills, people's abilities, and vision is more focused on making sure that the entire Food Policy Council is really sort of in line with its vision. Food policy is focused on legislative action, and food action is focused on more programmatic work. So we have some circles that are already officially linked to some of these circles. So training is officially linked to capacity building. That one's specifically focused on building capacity around shared leadership and self-governance. So as opposed to capacity building, which could be focused on, building capacity around a lot of different things. I know that circle is talking, for example, about nutrition education and kind of building capacity around that. Harm and repair is linked to vision, and that circle supports partners to learn, grow, and heal through conflict. So that's essentially the circle that exists to support partners in the network, whether they are working circle partners or just network partners, folks who receive our emails, folks who come into contact with the Food Policy Council. If harm occurs, that circle exists to help the parties involved work through that. We have then all of these circles that are sort of linked to the food action circle, but not officially. They're sort of all in that food action realm. So the Hilltown Food Council is focused on supporting access to local food in the Hilltowns specifically. The Food Access Advisory Committee is specifically focused on Grow Food Northampton's food access programming and making sure that participants in that programming are guiding the way that the programming is implemented. The Fort River Garden Circle plans and supports the Fort River Community Garden in Amherst. The storytelling circle is working on raising awareness about diverse food experiences, and the Amherst Mobile Market Circle plans and supports the Amherst Mobile Market. So you can see sort of like as we get farther away from the core circles, there's sort of more specificity in terms of what the circles do. So these circles, if you want to get involved in any of them, you can, let me see what Talia put in the chat here. You can see the calendar of when the circles are meeting online, and you can basically request to join a circle through the form on our Get Involved page. So that's another link that Talia put in the chat. And then you can request help with forming your own circle if what you want to do doesn't seem like it fits with any of these circles. And that is through our request form on the website. And like I said, you can go to the website if you would like to go to the Spanish version of the website if you want to read more about these circles in Spanish. Whoops. Okay, so the types of projects that you can submit is a shiny new idea or an oldie but a goodie. So essentially, you can submit for a project that has never existed before and it's a brand new idea, or you can say, you know what, this organization, this group has been doing this really awesome thing for a long time and we just think it could use a little bit more funding, or it needs more funding at this time. So both of those are totally okay. What is really important is that the project has at least one solid outcome or output. So that's the goal of the project, and the goal can't be for the circle to make more. So essentially what we're trying to do is sort of get away from process with these projects and really sort of focused on outcomes and solid things that are happening beyond just meeting in the circles. Here are some of the things that you can and can't spend money on. You can definitely spend money on people's time. You can spend money on smaller supplies, office supplies, that kind of thing. Short distance travel, if you need to drive somewhere, if you need to pay for people's bus fare or taxi fare, that's totally fine. Food for meetings or for distribution. So if your project involves distributing food or subsidizing the distribution of food, that's okay. Subcontracts to other agencies or people is fine. And then travel, dining, event registration, if they're explicitly linked to the project goals. So say your project, you need to get people in your project trained on something. And in order to do that, you need to go somewhere, you need to pay for meals, that kind of thing. You need to pay for, registration for a conference. All of that is allowable and fine. What you cannot spend money on is direct payments to people who are not working on the project. So you can't, for example, say, we want to take $25,000 and give, 100 people $2,500. I'm bad at math, but essentially you can't just take the money and portion it up and then just give it away to other people if they're not doing work on the project. And that includes politicians. So you can't use this money for lobbying, making gifts to politicians, that kind of thing. I kind of put this arbitrary number here, durable goods over $5,000. Essentially, like, this isn't, in nonprofit speak, this is called capital expenditures. So things like buildings, vehicles, kind of like big, durable pieces of equipment, you can't spend money on. And you can't spend money on unnecessary supplies. So the example that I put in the funding document, because this is the example our funder gave us, is, for example, if you're having an event, you don't need a bounce house in order to have an event. There might be other things that you need, but you don't really need a bounce house. So you can't put money for a bounce house in the grant. Travel, dining, events for pleasure, you can't say we're going to take this money and go to Hawaii on vacation. And then alcohol, tobacco, lottery, or cannabis, since these are state dollars, they're regulated and money cannot be spent on those things. All right, so a big question that has come up in a lot of conversations is, what if I'm not affiliated with a nonprofit agency and I want to get money through this grant and I don't want to be linked to a nonprofit agency? That is harder, but not impossible. The benefit of applying through a nonprofit agency is that nonprofits typically have the experience, the knowledge, the systems in place to handle the spending of money. But if you don't want to partner with a nonprofit agency, there are some different options that you have. Say, for example, a group of folks wants to do something independent of a nonprofit agency and they want to pay the people involved to do it. You can ask us at CES to administer stipends to those folks. If you do that, those stipends will have to follow our internal guidelines. You can ask us to set up an expense account at a local retailer. Say you want to have a series of events, we could set up an expense account at State Street in Northampton, and you could charge goods to that expense account. You can ask us to set up a subcontract with an individual. So that does require that the individual has a social security number. And we would be able to basically pay that individual directly from CES through a subcontract. Or you can track your expenses and send us an invoice. So you could say, I, George, am going to, do this project. I'm going to incur a bunch of expenses, and then I will invoice you, the collaborative, for all of those expenses. If you do that, it's really important that you maintain documentation. This is my last point before I hand it over. It is extremely important to get and keep receipts. This is for everybody. So, I know not everybody is used to sort of managing grants and things like that. It's so important that you maintain documentation for what you spent money on, because that's essentially illegal. Like, we get in trouble if you don't do that. So, yeah, so I just want to really hit that home, that no matter what kind of project you do, it is extremely important to document how you are spending money, to keep the documentation of how you are spending money, and to submit the documentation of how you are spending money. All right, so I think I'm passing it over to Kristen / Talia now.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I think actually if you could, I'm not sure, are you sharing your screen right now, Caitlin? If you could stop sharing, I'm gonna pull up the application, because the next thing we're gonna do is actually, I'm sure you all have a lot of questions and things turning around in your brains, but we wanna just take you through the application first before we go to questions, so that you kind of have a full picture before we get into sort of talking through questions and details. So I guess I just want to start out. I guess I can introduce myself because there's a few people here that I don't know. So my name's Kristen Whitmore, and I use she and they pronouns, and I work at the Collaborative for Educational Services with Caitlin and Talia, who's also here helping out with some slides and chat. And Clark is also here in the audience, and Marta too, who's a CES community liaison. So I guess I just wanted to say this is a really exciting opportunity for the Food Policy Council to be able to resource our circles. We've spent a lot of time working really hard to set up a structure that is community-led, that's collaborative, that is self-governed. And we now have 11 circles with 47 individuals working across the circles, which is really exciting. We just kind of, as the circles have been getting settled and getting their partners kind of into the circles, we've just done a count a couple of days ago and come to the realization we have 47 people engaged across all of the circles. So it's pretty exciting. And now we're kind of at this place where we have this discretionary budget and we are able to resource the circles to work on the aims and domains that they have set forth for themselves. So it's pretty cool and exciting that we'll be able to kind of, the council can kind of hit the ground running with some projects over the next year. One of the sticky pieces is that we kind of only have until the end of June 2023 to execute these projects because of the grant timeline. So I wanted to just put that into everyone's heads because we're kind of thinking about what we can do in the next less than 12 months with these funds that kind of helps the circles get working on whatever it is that they are excited about. So Caitlin just shared a ton of really helpful information about kind of big picture. What can you do with the funds? What is this money for? And now I'm going to take us through kind of how do you access the funds? So Caitlin mentioned that you do have to be engaged in a circle to access the funds. So if you're currently not attending a circle, that's okay. Totally okay. You could take a look at our website, the circles Caitlin pulled up, and look at the aims and domains and decide you want to get involved with one of those circles. Even if you don't become a decision maker or a working circle partner, as we call them, show up to the meeting and just start, sharing your ideas, talking about what you're excited about. Guests are always welcome at all of our meetings. So you don't have to worry like, oh, I don't know about sociocracy, or I haven't been too involved yet. It's totally fine. You can show up and share your idea and, go from there. But you do have to be engaged with a circle. That is kind of the precursor. You have to come to a meeting and get engaged with a circle. So once you do that, or maybe you are already engaged in a circle, you will start to get ready to think about applying for the funds. And that means you'll start to think about this application. So we've worked hard, I think, to make this application as simple as possible without kind of, while still asking you to kind of think through what you're going to do. And the purpose of that is not just so that we can monitor you or, review what you're doing. It's really to support the circles to have a plan for how you're going to execute your project and how you're going to do whatever your goal is, how you're going to meet that goal, how you're going to kind of work through the steps. As some people just put in the chat, like you've worked on budgets for a family trip or healthcare expenses or a birthday party, all of those things. It's, you all know you have to think in advance about, what am I going to have to do the day before? What about 2 days before? What about a month before? Do I have to invite people to the birthday party? I can't do that the day before, right? So there's a timeline that has to get built out. And sometimes you kind of have to do that backwards. Like, here's our goal, and how do we kind of backwards plan throughout, how long is it going to take for us to get to that goal? So this application tries to help you do that. And like I said, it tries to do that in the least kind of heavy way to give you the most flexibility and, just not a lot of busy work, just to sort of do what you need to do to plan your project effectively. So this document has been emailed out a bunch. I wonder, I can probably just put it in, or maybe somebody else can put it in the chat right now so that if folks want to look at it. So the beginning has just some instructions how to submit this application. So like I said, you'll be submitting this with your circle, not as an individual, but somebody will have to fill it out. So you might decide to select someone in the circle that takes the responsibility to fill out the application. You might co-work on it during circle meetings. You might select 2 people to kind of co-work on it outside of meetings. There's a lot of different ways you could do it, but somebody's got to fill this out and submit it. So there's some tools that we have developed to help the circles go through the process of planning. And we're going to talk about those toward the end of this session. So I won't go into them right now. I'm just going to skip over that part. But here it says, the delegate, whoever's submitting the application, should complete it in Google Docs or Microsoft Word and send it to Caitlin's email. And if you need any help with how to access a Google Doc or share and send documents in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, there's some instructions here, and you can also reach out to us and we can help you with that. So then we get into the application. It starts out with, what's the circle you're working with? Just typing in or writing that in. Who are the partners in the circle that you're working with? And what is the goal of your project? So like Caitlin mentioned, that's kind of the big outcome or output. What is the thing that you're going to do at the end of your project? What will be different? What will you have done that, what did you produce, or what process did you go through? What changed at the end of the project? And we ask that you include at least one number in your goal. So something quantitative that sort of is an output of some sort. So we have an example that we're going to use, that we're going to walk through to kind of describe this project planning process. So the project goal for our example project is to enjoy 2 fun and relaxing days camping with family. So you notice that there is that number 2 in there, right? 2 fun and relaxing days. So I'm going to read through the next piece, and then we'll pull up the slides and we'll walk through the example in more detail. So the next question in the application is, what will you do during this project? And this is where, it's your chance to explain your idea, your project. What is it? What are you planning to do? And, with some level of detail. So the example, to build on our camping example, says, we want to enjoy a fun and relaxing trip camping with our family. To get started, we'll find a good date that works for the whole family, book a campsite, collect the camping equipment, shop for food, and pack the car. Then we'll drive to the campsite and set up our camp. That's when the fun begins. We'll start off with a family hike through the woods. When we get back, we'll enjoy lunch cooked on the campfire. Then we'll go for a swim in the lake and then play a game of Frisbee. At dusk, we'll make dinner on the campfire and then play music on the guitar, have a sing-along, and make s'mores. Around 11 p.m., we'll crawl into our tents and sleep. In the morning, we'll wake up early and have breakfast, take down our camp, and head home after a fun and relaxing camping trip with our family. Sounds pretty nice. So that's sort of the big overview, right? This is what we're going to do over the course of the whole project. And then the next question asks you to get a little bit more specific. How will the project get accomplished? So like we talked about a minute ago, what are the things that have to happen in order for you to do each of these steps that you've kind of summarized in this what will you do during the project, this question. And the application gives you a table as an example. Like, this is an easy way to kind of break out what your tasks are, who's responsible for the tasks, and kind of when it will start and end as a timeline planning tool. You don't have to use the table in your application if you don't want to. You could use a different format, but this tends to be for some people, a helpful way to break out the tasks. So the tasks are broken out reflecting what I just read to you, but I'm going to actually stop sharing for a minute and move over to the slides, because we have some fun slides to walk us through the next piece. So I think Talia is going to share the slides.
Are you having trouble, Talia?
I'm like, I can't see anything. Oh, okay. I figured it out. So this is Camping with the Cats and Cookie for Talia's 26th birthday, starring all
coming up in a couple of days or weeks.
Next week. And these are all of my pets that will be starring in our little slideshow today. So first, we have planning the camping trip. So Snowball suggests that everyone goes camping for Talia's birthday. Sushi's wondering if he can drive. Cookie's questioning whether I even like being outside in nature. And Snowball is reassuring us that it's not a ploy to become an outdoor cat, because Snowball's goal in life is to be an outdoor cat. So, and then
So
S'mores
this
was
is the
just happy to
step.
be here.
Yes, this is the step where you talk to your family members about if they want to go camping and what are some dates that might be good for them.
Mhm. So we checked in with S'mores about whether or not August 6th was good for him. And he says it works. He just doesn't want to share a tent with Snowball. And Sushi's very excited to share a tent with Snowball. And Snowball's also very excited to continue to be his fake dad. And Cookie's just excited to go outside because he loves going outside. So next step then is booking the appointment. Snowball was very excited, so he was yelling at the beginning. But unfortunately, people at the Cedar camp don't understand cat meows. So I had to call instead to book the campsite. So that's next step after you've planned with your family. Now you book the campsite. And then you gotta pack. So S'mores found a chair that he thought would be really, really nice to bring with us on the campsite in our basement. And then he also found this bag of clothes that he thought would also be nice to bring with us on his campsite. So he has multiple sleeping options. And then next step is we gotta go shopping for the food. Snowball was in charge of the grocery list. He did not quite come back with the things that we needed because we can't all eat fancy feast. But otherwise he did a great job and grew a lot to be able to reach the shelves. So I'm really happy for him. Okay, next is packing the car. I had to pack the car even though it was for my birthday because all the pets are too small to pack the car. And I was a little upset, but that's okay. So next up is driving. Snowball was in charge of driving because he's finally old enough, but he's very upset. He takes car safety very seriously. So someone took their seatbelt off, so he had to check on them. And then this is us setting up when Cookie's ready because he would like to sleep in the tent, but he has to wait a little bit. Next up is our hike. Some of us got a little excited. So, somebody fell. Cookie was ready because Cookie very much enjoys running outside. And Sushi and Snowball were unsure about the freedom, but were very excited for it. I think Snowball maybe thought it was a trick. And then next, we are cooking lunch. S'mores was in charge of our lunch. He got a little distracted because there was wildlife, but I think he was a pretty good chef. So next up is hanging out in the water. Snowball and S'mores enjoyed their time in the water and on their floaties. Then we also played some Frisbee, but Sushi was unsure of how to play, so Cookie was in charge of teaching him. The next up is dinner, s'mores, and s'mores with s'mores. And we're just relaxing by the campfire. So it was a successful camping trip day one. And then next day, it's time to have breakfast. We woke up very early and S'mores was very hungry. And Cookie's just, again, happy to be here and just happy to spend time with his brothers. And then I am once again packing the car because the pets don't know how to pack the car. And then this was me unpacking the car and realizing that the chair is kind of heavy, but it's fine because the cats, again, cannot unpack the car. And that's it. We made it back. It was a successful trip. And this is the cast, everyone that was involved in our production. It's me, Sabine. Sabine was our photographer. S'mores, Snowball, Cookie, and Sushi.
Yay, and the project was a huge success. And yes, the cats definitely saved all their receipts from the fancy feast and they submitted them with when asked, they had them to submit. So we wanted to, thanks to Talia for putting this amazing slideshow together to show you all how easy it is to plan a project and have a successful execution of your project. It's just as easy as taking your cats camping. So I'm going to go back over to the application for a minute so that you can see So what Talia walked through was each of these items with the cats, you know, shopping for food, for the fancy feast, packing the car, all of those pieces. And yeah, that was awesome. So the last piece of the application that we ask you to submit is your expenses. So what money is it going to take to do the project that you've outlined? And we have a spreadsheet kind of tool that we put together to help you outline kind of what funds you're requesting and how you'll use them, that we're also asking you to submit along with the answers to those questions that we just went through. You don't have to use this spreadsheet. I know some people feel nervous about working with Excel or Google Sheets. We tried to make it really simple and user friendly, but I know for some people those two things don't go together, super easy and Excel. So if you want to do it a different way, that's totally fine. If you just want to use a calculator or however you do it, that works, as long as you are able to generate something that shows what you're going to spend and what costs are associated with that, and exactly how those funds will be used. I think, Caitlin, were you going to talk about the budget spreadsheet? Okay, so I'll pass it to you for talking through.
And before you do, before you stop sharing, I just wanted to mention the last page of the application is a table where you enter basically what's on the spreadsheet. So if you want to stay away from the Excel spreadsheet, you can just enter things right in this table in the application.
Yes, exactly.
So, and I also wanted to say, Talia, I loved your slideshow. That was amazing. And I also want to say, one of the things I really liked about it was that it shows, sometimes during a project, things don't go exactly as you planned, and you kind of have to figure it out as you go. So I think that's an important thing to say too, for folks who are less experienced with this. You can make all the plans you want and set all the goals you want, and sometimes things just won't go that way, and that's okay. We totally understand that. We also have made a lot of plans and set a lot of goals that didn't always go that way. So don't panic if things aren't going exactly the way you planned. All right, so I'm going to share the budget spreadsheet here. So I tried to make this really simple. I know it looks like a lot of words, but I'm really just sort of trying to explain as much as possible for folks who might be less used to doing things this way. So this is where you put a project goal, put your project goal here, just so we know what that is. And then there's a bunch of different columns, and on the top of the column, I put what question basically you're trying to answer in this column. And then this is, under that is what these things are typically called in nonprofit language. So that's what I put in the table that's in the application. So if you're trying to figure out which column goes with the table in the application, you can, just look here. And this, it just gives you an example of what kind of thing you might put in each column. Oh, Giselle, I just saw that you muted yourself, so I just want to make sure you should keep going. Do you need a break or anything?
No, we'll keep going. Okay,
sorry. And then this is basically how to write what you put in the column. So, what are we actually looking for? Like, what kind of thing should you type into the cell here? And then this is just item 1, items 1 through 16. You can totally add or delete rows if you need to match how many items are in your budget. If you need help with that, we can certainly try to help you. So the first column here is just, what do you plan to spend money on? In nonprofit speak, we call this line items. So it might be things like meals for events, flyers, stipends. And so we're looking for it expressed that way, just a very brief description that tells us what you're trying to spend money on. How many of this thing will you need? So this is called quantity. It's a word probably folks are familiar with. So for example, you might need 20 meals for 3 events. You might need 300 flyer copies. You might need 200 hours of someone's time. And what we're looking for here is a whole number and for you to just enter the total number. So for example, if you need 20 meals for 3 events, you'd want to put 60 here. So the reason that we want a number in this column is because we have this spreadsheet automatically set up to multiply this quantity column by this cost per item column so that you get the expenditures over here. So it's set up that this is the multiplication of this times this. So you have to enter numbers in those columns to get this to be a number too. Numbers only, no text. So this is the cost per item. How much does each individual thing cost? You might estimate that each meal will cost $15. Each flyer will cost 20 cents, $20 for each hour of someone's time, that kind of thing. And I guess, again, you want that expressed as a whole number. This column is set up. So I'll give an example here. So let's say we're doing 60 meals. We're doing meals for events. We're doing 60 meals. And we are estimating that each meal will cost $15. So this column is set up to automatically express it as a dollar amount. And then you can see this column automatically multiplied those two numbers together. Who will receive this money? So this will depend on how you're applying for the grant. So it might be a nonprofit organization, it might be a grocery store, it might be an individual person. So that's what we're looking for. It can be a combination. Maybe you want an organization to receive some of the money, maybe you want some of it set up as an expense account, maybe you want stipends administered by CES. You can put any combination of those things that you want in this column. And again, a very brief description here. So it might say like Grow Food Northampton or State Street or something like that. Again, this column is set up to automatically multiply 2 columns together. So it should be that as you go, this column kind of completes itself. This will be what we call expenditures. Essentially, you know, like what you're spending money on, ultimately, how much money do you need? And this is also set up to add all of these together. So you'll get a total project budget here. And then this column we call justification. Why do you think this thing you plan to spend money on is necessary for accomplishing your goal? So essentially, you know, oh, well, we need meals for these events to encourage people to come, for example. So it's just helping us understand why you're including this thing in your budget. Yeah, and that should just be a simple explanation. You don't have to go into too much detail, but yeah, so this might be a, you know, more text in this column than in other columns. The advantage of using this spreadsheet is it does all the math for you, and that can be really nice because, you know, I know that when I try to use my calculator instead of using something like this, I mess up a lot. So can be really helpful to use Excel for that reason. But again, if you don't want to use it, that's totally fine. I will stop sharing that. So this is where we have scheduled in some time for questions and answers. So if you have a question, why don't you raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat and we can read the questions from the chat as well. Oh, it looks like Johanny can't hear Giselle again.
I'm not muted, so I don't know.
Johan, do you want to do some tests, Giselle, to see if Johanny can hear you?
Johanny, ¿me escucha? Aló, 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 aló.
Spanish channel, I can hear you, Giselle.
Thank you. So it's definitely not me. Great.
Johanny, can you hear Giselle now? Johanny, ¿puede escuchar Giselle?
Johanny, ¿sí me escucha?
All right, we'll keep working on that. Marta, go ahead. What's your question?
Good morning, everyone. Let's say I wanted to make a plan for my neighbors to go to the Polio to Nuestras Raíces. It's a place where they have the farm, just a small little farm in there. And they have animals and they roast pigs, delicious. And so I can do an activity like that, correct?
You can do an activity like that, but you would have to get a circle to agree that that's how they want
Okay.
to
No
spend the
problem.
money.
No problem, but it's something related with food. That's why we had to concentrate on that.
Yeah, but I would say with a project like that, you would want to be really clear about what the goal is. So is the goal to eat delicious pork? You know, if that's the goal, we might say, I don't know if we need to, you know, give you money for this. But if the goal is to maybe educate your neighbors about how food is grown, then, you know, that's something that we would definitely be interested in spending money on.
I was thinking about since it's the majority, you know, is from by Spanish Puerto Rican, just to learn the culture of the food of that.
Sorry, I think that was just Johanny responding
Okay,
to.
no problem. I was just to let the other people know about the culture of the food of the culture of the Puerto Rican and
Okay, one second, Marta. Oh,
Guys, I don't know what's going on. She still doesn't hear me, and like she's asking questions. Like she's asking me if I can hear her in Spanish.
to explore, for other people to explore the Puerto Rican food and experience and the vegetable they have in that particular community and that particular project. Would that qualify for a project for? The
yeah,
food
again, I think you just want to be really clear about what the goal is. So, and remember, the goal has to include a number. So it might be, you know, educate 10 neighbors on, you know, food cultures, you know, in other communities or something like that.
And Marta, this is a theme that the Food Action Circle has been talking about, like having food gatherings, getting people together to talk about food and learn about food systems over food with meals. So you might come to the Food Action Circle if you're interested and bring that idea.
Okay.
And Dane, I see your, oh, sorry, Marta, is that good?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Dane, I saw your question in the chat. Do you want to say it out loud? Oh, sorry, that was Danielle. All right, go ahead, Dane.
I was like, did I ask a question? So my question is about what happens if you're like me. I have been aware of the Food Policy Council. I've been kind of following along with your guys' work for a long time, but I'm not part of a circle. I am, however, part of a couple different nonprofits in town in different ways. If I have an idea for a project, can I join a circle with like just the express intent of being like, I'm here because I have an idea for a project and I think this circle should get behind it? Or do I have to show up and be like, I'm part of the circle and I'm demonstrating a commitment to like the long-term work of this circle before I can propose something? Just real talk.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. So we're not putting a requirement on that, right? Like we're not saying expressly, you know, which of those things it has to be. But our circles do operate with sociocracy and with shared decision making. And so, you know, I would just request that if folks are gonna, you know, sort of come in now and bring an idea to a circle, if you want to stay long term, or if you just sort of want to rally folks around that idea, to just be authentic and be honest about how you're showing up in the circle and let the circle decide how they want to handle that. You know, this is all shared decision making. So, you know, it's really about the folks in the circle and how those folks kind of go through the process to arrive at what idea to submit.
That's a really fair answer. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could add one more thing on, I think one of the really cool things about the structure that the Hampshire County Food Policy Council is using is that, you know, these circles can kind of come together to work on something and kind of follow the energy. So if there's energy to work on a specific project or idea, people can join together and form a circle and work on that idea. And then, you know, maybe that project ends and that circle dissolves and, you know, the energy goes somewhere else. And that's totally fine. We have the core circles that kind of hold like the big domains that we are working on. So there is some continuity, but it's expected and okay that, you know, there is some movement in terms of like what projects or programs we're working on. So, you know, I think getting involved in a circle does take a little bit of investment because of sociocracy and, you know, shared decision making, but it's not necessarily like a commitment for, you know, 10 years or something.
Yeah. And I see a couple of questions in the chat about how many projects a circle can apply for. So again, we're not saying anything specific about that. You know, one of the kind of tricky things about this is we do have a rolling deadline. So the latest that a proposal can be submitted is December 31st. So say that one circle submits 3 projects right away. We might want to wait a little bit and see what other projects come in and kind of do some decision making based on that. So there's no restriction on how many projects a circle can submit, but there will probably be some decision making in the hub around how we want to handle a project or a circle submitting multiple projects compared to, you know, if some circles need longer time and haven't gotten their projects together yet. So there's no guarantee, you know, that a project that's submitted will get funded. There's some decision making that will have to happen in the hub around that. Okay, Gilad.
Hi, thank you so much for y'all's presentation. It was super helpful, especially the cat example. That really helped me understand everything. At the beginning, one of you spoke about sort of the important aspect, an important aspect being that the idea is somehow connected to outcomes or outputs. And I know you mentioned this again a minute ago about having specific numbers attached to kind of how we're thinking about something. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about that and sort of how y'all are thinking about the types of outcomes that the Food Policy Council is hoping to see from this funding opportunity, or how that, it seems like that was an important framing or aspect of it. So I was hoping to just learn a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main distinction there is that essentially we have 2 pots of money at play here, and one pot of money already exists and already funds the circles to exist, and already, you know, we already have stipend guidelines, and so the functioning of the Food Policy Council is already funded. So we're just not looking for proposals that fund the functioning of the Food Policy Council, because we already have money set aside for that. So we're looking for something above and beyond the functioning of the Food Policy Council. And I would say that's the main requirement. You know, like I said, well, maybe I didn't say, but an event, a garden, a training, you know, all of these things could be solid outcomes or outputs. The main thing is, you know, that you don't say, oh, we want the circle to meet more, or we want to pay people in the circle more to meet, or anything like that. It has to be something above and beyond what the circle is already doing. Kristen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to give an example. The Storytelling Circle has been working on a proposal to a different funder for a project that would develop and create a community story archive on our website. And part of that we hope might be funded through the discretionary budget through this process that we're talking about. So some of the outcomes that from that project are things like we'll train 8 community members in story gathering, and then we'll hold 3 workshops across the county to collect 20 additional stories. So those are some you know, specific numbers that kind of go along with this broader goal of developing a community story archive for the Food Policy Council.
Does that answer your question, Gilad? Yeah, great. Clark.
Hey, thanks for all this information. I am in the hub, and as I don't know if it might be helpful to just, if I missed it, maybe you already said this, but who's in the hub? So who's sort of the grant, I guess, reviewers? And maybe to talk a little bit about how I think maybe we're still thinking about how we see our role, but just how we're thinking about that process, because typically like a grant reviewer would be like, you know, making the final decision. And I think my sense is that we're really trying to let circles, you know, put forth eligible projects, and just want to make sure that like those projects like check out and look good, right?
Yeah.
So if you could just maybe talk a little bit about how you're seeing that. And then I have a question after that.
Well,
But,
do you want to talk about how you're seeing that? You're also.
well, I just sort of said, I guess, how I'm seeing, like, I kind of see us in the hub as, yeah, as like, as just like making sure the applications like check out in terms of eligibility and like alignment with the mission. And, you know, I think we're not quite sure like how many applications will come in for what amount of money. So it is possible at some point that the applications could be competitive, in the sense that we would have to like decide what to fund over something else if like we have a lot of applications.
Yeah.
So that's kind of as far as I've thought, but I also just want to say, maybe we could just be transparent about who is in the hub and how they are in the hub, based on the Food Policy Council structure.
Yeah. So I can say a little bit about that. So essentially the way that the Food Policy Council structure works is that I talked about those 4 core circles: food action, food policy, capacity building, and vision. And I'll just say, you know, in case folks don't know, there was a long process that led to the Food Policy Council being structured this way. Very involved process, a lot of perspectives at the table. And those folks who were involved in that process decided that these would be the 4 core circles that we would start with. And the hub is made up of coordinators and delegates from each of those 4 core circles. So it happens to be at this time that is 4 people who are here: Clark, me, Talia, Kristen, and then 3 people who are not here: Kia Auki, Roz Malkin, and Rosanna Salazar. And so that's essentially what that means, is that everybody who's in the hub is also in these circles. And I don't think there's really any circle in our network so far that actually doesn't have representation from somebody who's in the hub as staff support at the very least. So you know, so the hub is like very in touch with the circles, and really, you know, folks in the hub will be also in the conversations and in the circles to guide the circles through the process. You know, this is not how we typically do grant making. And I guess that's why I'm sort of like, it's hard to figure out how to talk about this. Like I keep talking about it as a funding opportunity as opposed to a grant, because typically, you know, grant making really depends on somebody who's an independent sort of reviewer, you know, making decisions about, you know, something that they're not invested in or whatever. We're trying something different here. You know, we're trying basically to say, okay, we have some money, we want to get it out into our network, and we want to hear from folks in the circles about how they want to use that money. So it's an experiment, and thanks for being along for the ride with us. And Clark, did you have another question or something you wanted to say?
I feel like I should know the answer to this, being in the hub, but maybe it hasn't come up for us. And that is, can a circle submit multiple applications? So for example.
Yeah, we covered this already.
No, that was multiple projects.
Okay,
I wasn't sure if that was like a project within, or multiple projects within one application. The question, because what I was thinking was like, oh, because some of the circles I'm in, I'm like, oh yeah, like there's something right, like we're already know we want to apply for, but like we might, but in a couple of months, we'll probably have a lot more of a sense for other things. And so, you know, should we like, you know, get a quick application out the door for like the project that's like totally, you know, we're all on board with, and then have a couple months to think through some other projects, and then we could submit a second application for.
Yeah. The answer to that is not no. Like, we haven't expressed anywhere that that's not okay. So I think that implicitly makes the answer
Yeah.
yes. But I think that, you know, we're going to have to just kind of see how things go, you know, like how much funding are people asking for, at what pace, at what rate are, you know, circles asking for funding. And I think I said earlier, you know, if we get 3 applications in rapid succession from one circle before we get applications from any other circle, I think we'll just have to wait a little bit and, you know, maybe be in communication with that circle about which of those projects feels like a priority for them. Because I think we want to just be as equitable as possible in how this funding gets distributed.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important is just in the spirit and rooted in our values around collaboration and shared power around decision making, this hub group is very open to just honest communication about what you're thinking about or challenges you might be having with, you know, like you just described, Clark, like we actually need some money to do something right now. Could we submit a small application and then just shoot us an email, let us know. We're totally open to talking about flexible or, you know, adaptive ways of, you know, strategizing around whatever the circles need. So I put in the chat, like, we've been thinking a little bit about this as sort of like allocating our budget to the circles. Like, this money is meant for the circles. It's meant for all of you to do work in the community. So we're not thinking about it as a competitive process. It's more about like, what's the best use of these funds and how does the best use of these funds get generated by the circles themselves and not by us kind of, or, you know, anyone in particular deciding, okay, this is the budget and this is what we're doing in the Food Policy Council. We want those ideas to come from the circles themselves. So it's more a process of like, how do we figure out the best way for the circles to do that versus we're selecting or, you know, awarding these funds to certain groups or projects. So definitely, if you have questions in an ongoing way, talk about it in your circles, talk about it with your coordinator. All the coordinators are in the hub. So there's a direct link back to, you know, the group that's actually kind of making the final call. So that's also, you know, really different from traditional funding structures. The people that are kind of giving the final check in the hub are going to be submitting proposals as part of circles too. So, you know, we're not calling it a conflict of interest. We're calling it collaborative decision-making because that's what this is all about. So it's kind of turning the traditional funding kind of structure and concept on its head a little bit, but it might take a little bit of figuring out to, you know, how we actually make that work. It is an experiment.
We're all very used to business as usual. It's hard for all of us to sort of break outside of the mold and figure out exactly what that looks like. So yeah, thanks, Kristen. And I'll just clarify, like, not all coordinators in all circles are in the hub, but all the coordinators from the core circles are in the hub. All right. Any other questions before we move on to some of these kind of bonus tools that we provided?
I see Alexandra has one last question here. Will the hub update the circles about projects that are funded and funds that are still left to apply for?
Yeah. I think so. I think we will be, you know, as we mentioned, those of us in the hub are also out there in the circles or supporting the circles. And I think we'll be in regular conversation with the circles about, you know, what's been funded and what's available. All right. Like Kristen said, any questions are welcome at any time. You can send them to me. You can, you know, I'm the operational coordinator for the Food Policy Council, so I'm happy to field questions at least, even if I'm not the right person to answer them. So, and my email address is all over these application materials. So go ahead and send questions to me if you have them. All right, so we have the working circle project planning tool that Kristen developed. Do you want to walk us through that, Kristen? And I'll just introduce this by saying, essentially what we did is, we have one really required thing, and that's the application. And if you want to use the budget spreadsheet to fill out the application, go ahead and do that. All of the rest of these tools are basically bonus. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, all of the circles, all of our 11 circles are in totally different places. Some circles have already been working on projects. The Fort River Garden Circle has already executed a project. They've already built a community garden. The Storytelling Circle already has a really solid and well thought out idea, this community archive project. And then there's the Food Action Circle that has been brainstorming, capacity building as well, brainstorming, talking about ideas, but hasn't really gotten yet to settle on a specific project. And probably lots in between there as well. So we really wanted to just recognize and honor that, and give y'all some tools that if you need them, they are there to help you, go through the process of figuring out what is the project that you want to submit an application for. So this is before you get to the point of actually writing out that application, the process of figuring out what it is that you're going to ask for money for. So the first tool is just kind of a broad working circle project planning tool. And this really is, for anybody that has done kind of program management or program design, it's really based on that kind of concept. So it says here, the tool guides you through a process to develop a project plan for your working circle project, including creating a budget with a specific funding request. It's best to use this tool once your circle has decided on a basic idea, but still needs to develop the details. For each segment, spend time discussing the questions and then, type up some paragraphs outlining your plan. So I'm not going to go through this in a ton of detail, but I'll just kind of scroll through so that you know what's here. And you could bring this to your circle and say, I think we should use some of these questions to plan our project. So it kind of starts out with just like, what is our vision for change? What is our kind of problem statement, issue statement, vision? And then it has some guiding questions that you might use in your circle to have a conversation about what is our vision. And then there's kind of a few check questions that help you understand if you've like fully explored this piece. So do working circle partners have a shared understanding of the issue? Are diverse perspectives included, etc.? So once you've got your vision, how do we change? Also known as goals and outcomes. What are the big, broad changes or goals that you want to see through this project? What are the smaller goals? Having conversations about that. And then checking in about, are our goals feasible? Are they impactful? Can we actually do this in a year's time? Are there any unintended consequences we might not be thinking of? What are some setbacks? Like, these are the questions you want to be having or talking through when you're planning a project. Once you've gotten through that, what is the action? What are the specific activities, strategies that you're going to undertake to reach the future that you envisioned? And who's going to do those activities? So this does connect very closely to that question in the application. So going through this conversation in your circle will help you to fill out the application as well. And then we have the resources question, also sometimes called asset mapping or needs assessment or inputs and budgeting. So what do we already have that will help us do our project? What strengths or resources, the gifts of our circle partners, and what do we still need to do this project? Who would need to be paid? What materials and supplies would we need? There's a typo here. What equipment? This will really help you. This could be a conversation you have getting ready to fill out the budget spreadsheet. And then this last piece is about learning, reflection, sharing, sometimes called evaluation. How will we know if we're successful? If the project, once the project is done, what will be different? What will success look like? And how will we reflect and learn from our work as we think about the arc of the Food Policy Council? How do we think about how the project that we're planning right now connects to future work of the Food Policy Council, or the next project that you might want to plan after that? And how will we talk about our work? What stories will we tell about the project we did? How will we communicate that out? And that's it. So again, these are really kind of discussion questions that you could bring to your circle. You could use this to kind of use your circle meetings to talk through these questions to get ready for filling out your application.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yep.
I will walk us through another tool. So as Kristen mentioned, these are, discussion questions that you can use in the circle that she just went through. And some of you who are less familiar with sociocracy or still new to sociocracy might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. How do we actually make a decision about what project to fund? And we're going to have Dane's coming in with new ideas and interloping in our circle. I'm just kidding, Dane, I'm giving you a hard time. So we developed this guide to circle process for choosing a project. So this is really geared toward facilitators in the circle. So if you're here representing a circle and you're not a facilitator, you might just want to let the facilitator in your circle know that this guide exists. And I will say that, this, I think we wrote it really thinking about the discretionary budget process, but I think this is a good overall guide for, what are some of the different building blocks of sociocracy that you can use to make decisions in your circle. So it basically walks you through, here's the goal that you're trying to achieve, and here are some of the basic steps that you can use to achieve the goal of deciding on a project. So we start typically with picture forming and proposal shaping. So that document that Kristen just walked us through is a really good example of something that might help us with picture forming and proposal shaping. So picture forming is essentially the process of saying, okay, what are the questions that we are trying to answer? What is the shape of this thing? What do we want it to look like? What characteristics do we want it to have? So you could sort of generate a list here. You could generate a list of questions that will be answered by the proposal, a list of issues you want the proposal to address, a list of existing resources that you want the project to build on, or a list of characteristics you want the project to have. So essentially the idea here is that this is the process you go through to sort of figure out what is the world, of possibilities, or the world of things that we want to focus on when we're thinking about a project. Throughout this document, there are facilitation tips. So just sort of things to be aware of, or, things that might come up as you're going through and facilitating these processes. And then from picture forming, you go into proposal shaping. So proposal shaping is basically the process of going from, okay, well, we came up with this big list, and now let's try to figure out how we can generate a proposal for the whole group that sort of meets all of the criteria that we put into the list. And so you might go through, several rounds of that. That includes somebody making a proposal and, reacting to that, somebody modifying the proposal. This can be, a big process unto itself, is sort of trying to come up with what that proposal is. And it could be like, you could sort of do this in terms of what's the goal of the project, right? So like I propose that the goal of our project is to bring 2 cats camping for 2 nights or something like that. And then once you actually have a proposal to work in the circle, there are sort of several ways that you could go about, deciding whether you want to work with that proposal. So you could go through the basic consent process. So that's the rounds that we use in sociocracy, which are understand, checking for clarifying questions, explore, which is reacting, and then deciding, which is consenting to the proposal. This walks you through how to do that. There is selection, where you basically have a bunch of different options to choose from and people kind of nominate. So maybe you have, 3 different ideas in the circle, and you're sort of trying to figure out which of these do we want to focus on first. You can sort of have circle members in the group nominate an idea to focus on first, and then go through a decision-making process related to those nominations. You can get feedback. You can say, okay, we have 3 ideas, but we don't want to decide this just in the circle. We want to know, what do others in our community think about this idea? So you could go through some sort of information gathering process, probably outside of the circle, and bring that information back to the circle to inform how to move forward. You could form helping circles. So you might say, okay, we have 3 different ideas. Let's form 3 helping circles to kind of flesh out what each of these ideas might look like a little bit more, so that they can, really get a very clear proposal to bring back to the group. Helping circles typically are short-term circles, so they will exist basically for the purpose of clarifying or developing a proposal, and then disband, once that proposal is developed, to bring back to the circle. And then task delegation is also an option. So you might say, okay, actually we, have a good proposal that we all feel good about, but what we want is to flesh it out a little bit more, kind of understand the shape of it a little bit better. So, you, George, could you go do the budget spreadsheet, and you, Clara, could you please fill out the application and bring those back to us so that we can understand a little bit more, play with those, give input into those things. And that's it. So this is just the sort of tool that you use if you're trying to figure out, okay, wow, how do we as a circle go from this big world of possibilities of ideas that we could submit proposals for, to actually making a decision and submitting a proposal. And then there is another tool in here that was developed by Kia, and that is the project budget planning tool. So this is just sort of, I'll share this one. We were hoping Kia would be able to make a little video to talk about this herself, but she wasn't able to do that ultimately. So this is just sort of a much simpler, if you kind of want something that's less detailed, than the document Kristen walked us through, or something to just kind of focus you a little bit more on a project idea. This just sort of helps you think through, how do we think about expenses? What are the fixed costs? What are the things that we know we're going to have to spend money on, and we know how much those things are going to be? What are the variable costs, the things that we don't know how much they're going to be, and how do we estimate that? So this sort of just helps to, focus a little bit on what is the process you want to go through to really get to a project idea, and then to kind of track how that project idea is going. And I wish Kia could have explained this in her own words, because I'm sure I didn't do it justice, but.
Yeah, I would add that one thing I think Kia would say if she was here is that, well, Kia's on vacation enjoying herself, so that's a good thing. But I think she would emphasize that she developed this from her experience running her own indoor landscaping business for many years. So really coming from more of a business perspective versus a nonprofit or grants perspective. So for folks that might be more inclined to appreciate that type of point of view, this tool might be more helpful.
Yeah, totally. All right, we have a little bit of time left. Are there any questions about the kind of optional supplemental tools? Marta, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was a little late to the meeting, but all these projects that people are gonna think about is for next year?
It is for, it could start as early as right now, really. If you submitted a proposal this week and the hub, thought it looked good, we could start really as soon as, the hub kind of decides, yeah, this all looks good, go ahead with it.
This is not one season idea or project, right?
It just has to be completed by June 30th, 2023. So it can start anytime between now and then, but it has to be completed by June 30th, 2023.
June 30, 2030.
And that means all the funds have to be spent. There can't be any spending of the funds after June 30th, 2023.
Okay, I just, my mind was we had to do it now before the end of the summer, but it could be
No.
any, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I think that just means we did our job really well. Information session accomplished. All right, well, our interim and final reports required. We have not really talked about reporting. Like we have said, the folks who are in the hub are involved with the circles, so we'll kind of be tracking on the projects and knowing what's going on that way. We have not set up any requirement for reporting. All right. Thanks everyone for attending. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, if you have any questions, just email me at any time. I'll put my email in the chat here, but I think most of you probably have it. And I appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Bye.